So today we have Ms. Tova Reich, who is an American novelist, and a quick review to her career. She had been an instructor in English at Southern Connecticut State College, American University, and she has been editor of several publishers, and she has bagged Edward Louis Vallant Award for the novel Master of the Return. It's considered one of the magnum opus of Tova Reich. And few of her novels are Mara, Master of the Return, The Jewish War, My Holocaust, 100 Philistine Foreskins, a novel, and today on which we are going to have a discussion, Mother India, which was published in 2018. So quick review of the novel would be, this is a novel about three generations of women of the same family line. We have Ma, the mother character, who's in search of an eternal life, and she is a Jewish mother. She comes to India for salvation. She wants to die in the Varanasi Ghat, the Banaras Ghats. She comes to India and has a peaceful death here. And then there is this character of Meena, who is the daughter of Ma, and we have this character Maya. Actually, the novel is divided into three parts: Ma, Maya, and Meena. So, and it's in the first-person narrative, where Meena tells the story about her mother as well as her daughter. Okay, she plays an intermediate. About the novel, in a single line, I would like to say that it is a novel that the characters of the novel are, in a way, they have a desire to be free of everything, that everything that bounds, that bonds the character, the life of a person in this particular area under various institutions like religion, marriage, whatnot. So I would be handing over the mic to Tova. And just before that, I would like to say that there are very pertinent themes under which actually the novel is a very good research material, so to say. So there are various themes that that are underlying in the novel. I would like to pass over the mic to Tova. Let us speak.
To speak first, or to just? I think I'm supposed to use this one. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me now? Okay. The novel, as Raji just told you, is divided into three parts. The first part is called Ma. It's the story of a family of extremely Orthodox religious Jews from Brooklyn, New York, who have connections, have feelings, have aspirations toward India. The narrator of the novel is a character called Meena, and she early on breaks away, rebels from this very strict Orthodox background, very religious Jewish background, and becomes involved with India, expresses it as a tour guide. She's a lesbian. She marries a beautiful princess, basically, for a period of time. And she has a daughter from a marriage that she undertook basically as a way to get out of her house. She just accepted an arranged marriage and then left it. That was her only way out of the house. The novel has themes not only about mothers and daughters, but it has themes related to religion, toward the idea of seeking through religion meaning in life, but then the nature of religion kind of exploding into extremism, fanaticism. It deals with death. It just is it has a kind of richness thematically, if you want to break down a novel in themes, basically it's a novel about human beings. I should also tell you, before I read the sections that I've chosen to read, I'm going to read you right from the beginning, but you need a little bit help to sort of help situate you in the novel. Mina, first of all, is a twin. She's a twin to a boy. She's a fraternal twin. I don't know why they call a boy-girl twin fraternal twins. I mean, that refers to the male. But anyway, she is a fraternal twin, and her brother is a kind of what Jews called an Eloi, which is a kind of boy genius who grows up into a rabbinical genius, goes to Israel, and becomes kind of a guru and exploits his position as a guru to the point where he is indicted in Israel and begins to run across the world. He also ends up in India at the end of the novel. The middle section, Maya, is about the daughter that Mina has with this guy that she marries for a short time. And her story is a rather tragic story. I should also say that each of the sections takes place in a different city in India. The first one, Ma, takes place in Varanasi. The second one, Maya, takes place in Mumbai, Bombay. And the third, final section takes place in Kolkata. To really get this section, I'm going to start reading about Ma's decision. You need to picture Ma. She's a woman close to 80. She's from an extremely Orthodox Jewish background, which means that she would be recognizable in the streets, not necessarily in the streets around here. I don't see too many of them. But they wear wigs, they're covered in a certain way, they conduct their lives in a certain way. For her to make a decision to go to Mumbai, to go to Varanasi, and to die there actually is a very extreme thing for her to do. She ends up, because her daughter is a tour guide, she ends up in a flat that is that is in the same building as this group called Chabad. Now you know about Chabad because if you remember the Mumbai Terrorism Act, it targeted also Chabad in Mumbai, and Chabad is a movement that sends usually couples, a rabbi, a male and his wife as couples to sort of create a house in cities all over the world, so mostly for Jews who would travel, who could come there. The Mumbai story was a big story during the 2008 terrorist attack, and it's featured very significantly in the second chapter, Maya. And in this case, Ma has a place in the same apartment building, a flat. She has a flat in the apartment building where the Chabad has its house, its Chabad house. The rabbi there is Asi. They work as a pair. They're sort of like twins, Asi Dasi. And the other character you need to be introduced to is the character of Manika, who is an Indian woman of very low caste or maybe no caste. And she's basically given as a present to the mother, Ma, when Ma settles there. She begins to play a role in this section, and her role gets stronger and stronger. So I'm going to start reading now. The holy man said, "Whosoever dies in Varanasi will achieve liberation, even a cockroach." It was the bold-faced pull-out quote in a magazine my mother opened at random during chemotherapy at her local medical center in Brooklyn. Lounging on the salmon-colored leatherette recliner as the toxic infusion dripped into her veins, Ma read every single word of the article. She had been looking forward to death as liberation, was how she justified it to me later. So what was this business now of having to schlep? Schlep is a Yiddish word, means like drag your body, all the way to Varanasi, India, nearly 8,000 miles away on the backside of the earth. But as she continued to reflect on it, she recognized that liberation was actually not in the cards in the Jewish death deal. Where you ended up in the next world, heaven or hell, Gan Eden or Gehenna, depended on your docket in this life. You were never truly liberated from the fallout from this life. And this was also true of the overcrowded Hindu cosmos, with its 36 million idols and getchkas. Depending on your performance evaluation on this earth, you were reborn in another form. As a starlet or a slug, to plod all over again. Only if you died in Varanasi were you guaranteed moksha, regardless of your record, the holy man declared. Only by dying in Varanasi, in the lap of Mother Ganga, would you achieve true release from the wheel of life, liberation from the grinding cycle of death and rebirth. The afterlife was this life, the one she had been living. This was the truth Ma now grasped. She had suspected it all along. It explained everything. She had been stuck in the punishment of her afterlife all these years. She had no interest in a sequel. It was not an accident that Ma's hand had fallen upon that magazine and that it had opened it itself up like an exhaled breath to that page. It was her karma, she told me, with the wicked grin of an initiate. The holy man was speaking directly to her. He was sending her a message, special delivery. It was then and there, as she spun it out to me afterward, in that chemo parlor with its decor the color of viscera, that she was swept up by an inspiration. She would stop all her treatments and go to Varanasi to die. So the mother makes this decision, and the intervening pages, until I find the page that I'm going to start reading to you again, describes her adjustment to Varanasi, which ends up with her, I read from manuscript because I have a hard time reading from my book. The problem with a book, once you see it in print, is you can't take your pencil to it and fix it up. With manuscript, you create an illusion for yourself by reading from manuscript. But anyway, let's see. So she settled in this apartment in the same quarters where the Chabad people live, and suddenly her situation deteriorates. In the meantime, she more and more every day she makes friends with various people, the eunuchs and monkeys and her special driver, and she goes every day to the Manikarnika Ghat, the largest burning ghat, and she goes there and sits all day and basically becomes like a goddess. Nobody knows who she is and what she is. People put flowers at her feet. And finally, her situation deteriorates. And so this is Mina talking again. The next day, the Rebbetzin Dasi, this is the Chabad wife, called. Ma had taken an unmistakable turn for the worse. I should come at once. I was in Jerusalem when I received the call, putting the final touches on the schedule for a 2-week retreat at the meditation center in Dharamsala for some of the veteran members of Women in Black who for over 2 decades had been holding vigil in their black kerchiefs every Friday afternoon before the Sabbath at France Square, not far from the official residence of the Prime Minister in Israel, against war and violence in general, and against the occupation of the West Bank in particular. I am ideologically very sympathetic to this noble cause and was working especially hard to reward these obviously extremely well-deserving heroines with an amazing experience. Even so, I immediately dropped everything and handed over the entire dossier of their itinerary to one of my agents on the ground in our branch offices in an old Templar building in German colony. I took the first flight out of Tel Aviv that I could get. Price in this emergency was of course not an issue, and landed in Mumbai in the early hours of the morning. From there, I connected via SpiceJet to Varanasi, arriving at my mother's apartment in the late afternoon. The Rebbetzin Dasi was in the kitchen, cradling an infant in one arm who was nursing at her breast, a toddler dragging down on her skirt. With her free hand, she was stirring a pot of rice and lentils on the stove for her other children, who were climbing like monkeys all over the sofa in the living room, the cushions piled up to form the ramparts and turrets, the chambers and hidden recesses of a fort. Dasi nodded a somber greeting and jerked her head toward the closed door of my mother's bedroom. Ma was in bed with Monica's face poking out from under the covers beside her. I kissed my mother's dry forehead like old parchment under my lips. Ma, I let out. What took you so long, she said. I was waiting. I have to talk to you. I didn't know if I could hold out much longer. Her voice was feeble, practically inaudible. Monica rose from the bed and left the room in obedience to a wordless signal from my mother. Ma indicated to me to draw nearer and bring my ear closer to her mouth. If you love me, Ma spoke, put your hand under my thigh and do me a favor. Do not bury me in America or in Israel or in the ground anywhere, but when I am dead, carry my body along the Ghats from Asi to Manikanika, cremate me there and throw my ashes into the river. With my hand under my mother's thigh, I argued fiercely. Her last wish, so beyond recall, such an unfair burden to lay on the back of your own child. But she would not listen to reason, no matter how intensely I struggled. Even when I resorted to an appeal to her lifelong religious convictions and observance, which was truly ironic since personally and publicly I had rejected all that. It's a sin, a violation of our faith, and so on and so forth, I argued. The Torah says, dust you are and to dust you return. We Jews bury our dead. That's why we were given the land of Israel as our eternal estate, our resting place. In other words, our graveyard, our cemetery. Ma shook her head. She had already taken up too much space above ground. She could not bear to be weighed down under the earth with generations stomping on top of her, lying on her back in her grave, looking up between their legs. The idea alone gave her a headache, suffocated her. She could not accept being plunged into the darkness, a plague so thick you could touch it. She could not abide the rain falling on her grave, the frost, the snow, the cold. She suffered from the very thought. She could not give herself over to be consumed by worms and beetles, recycled in the food chain, processed and excreted. She'd rather go up in smoke and be removed from the system. The family will scream bloody murder. They will disown you, I said. Ma's lips tightened. Let them compare her to scattered dust. Then, for scattered dust, you are not required to sit Shiva. You are not excused from saying Kaddish. You would have no grave or marker, I said. There would be no place you would be on this planet. I would have no place to come to if I need you. Ma looked at me as at a stranger. She could no longer be at her post forever, faithfully waiting for me in case I needed her. When the Messiah comes in the end of days, I cried in desperation, you would have no remains. You would have no body to resurrect. You would be reduced to ashes. She closed her eyes sanctimoniously. She would be in great company then with the 6 million. Throughout this ordeal, my hand was under my mother's thigh. I could feel the weight and heat of her body in which she had lived her life, through which she had experienced her reality. I could feel what it was like to be her, the constriction of her fears, the insistence of her desires. My hand was very close to the womb that was the source of my own being. This is a very ancient form of oath-taking, the hand under the thigh, biblical. It was what the patriarch Jacob required of his son Joseph when he too was on his deathbed, under the thigh, grazing the testicles. Through this most intimate contact, transmitting the full urgency of his final wish with regard to his own funeral arrangements. To be conveyed back to the land of Canaan, to lie with his fathers in Hebron rather than to be buried in Egypt, a wish Joseph granted with an extravagant royal spectacle of mourning, though first he could not resist embalming the old man in accordance with Egyptian rites, albeit in breach of Jewish ritual. Jacob's thigh, under which Joseph's hand was pressed, had been wounded when he had wrestled with the angel of God till the break of day in Machanaim. My hand under my mother's thigh, I could feel how grievously she too had been wounded, how damaged she was. "I'll do it, Ma," I said. She startled me by opening her eyes. "Promise me." I promised. So I'm going to stop here. I could read another page and a half, but I see there are a lot of references here that go unexplained, so I'm going to just stop right here.
Okay. What we see is this paradox of a Jewish woman, a Jewish mother coming to India to have an Indian cremation. So what is the idea of mother that you see in a Jewish setup and coming to India and choosing to die in India, and how this transformation of thought changes her identity as a woman?
Well, this was a woman who was a very strict religious woman and followed all the rules all her life. And this is an example of a woman in her old age when she really has nothing to lose and is not demented, although it could be attributed to dementia, who suddenly does something wild and completely out of character and decides to do this thing. And she carries out this act of independence, unlike any act she carried out in her life. She never was an independent person. So now she carries out this act and is helped by her daughter in this act, and dies in Varanasi. And the rest of the section proceeds with the funeral procession and her final cremation.
As far as I understand, this book is also about religion. Religion,
yes.
The seeking, the searching, and even about the religious extremism that we see today. Yeah, the religious extremism we see today, and there is a scope of controversy in India from the novel, where there is a reference to this hugging ma, the hugging amma, the concept of hugging amma. So how do you place this religious context of the novel?
Well, the book is about mothers, among other things, and it's about the idea of mother. We all have an idea of mother. We think of our mother as the person who will always love us, who will care if we suffer, who will, old people dying, aged people, people who suffer, men, women, cry out for mother. They believe that there exists somewhere someone who could maybe save them, but if she can't save them, she at least cares. And she cares if they suffer. So the idea of mother is very strong, but the reality of mother is different from the idea in the sense that there are also not good mothers. In this particular case, Ma does something very independent in complete defiance of the rules of her family, creates a great burden, and in a way, never really, even though she's cremated, she never really dies. Mina carries her around on her back to the end of the book. So the idea of mother is one concept, and then there's the reality of mother that also operates in this book in various ways, and it operates in other ways with other characters too, because Mina is also a mother, and she has a daughter, and her daughter suffers a very strange and dramatic fate. And also, and I mentioned to you that it deals with the terrorist attack in Mumbai, and that was very tied in with the mother issue. I don't know if you recall the terrorist attack, but it was a huge attack. It killed about 160, 170 people, not only the people in the Chabad Center, but in the Chabad Center, it killed a couple, and their child, a little boy, was saved by their child's nanny. The nanny was called Sandra. She was a Nepalese woman, and she became a mother. And there's a scene in the book in which there's a rooftop from which they were watching the terrorists, the building in which the terrorists are located. And at a certain point, the child is brought out of the building in the arms of this nanny, Sandra, and crying in Hebrew the word for mother, Ima, Ima, Ima. And everybody, including the soldiers, with their AK-47s and all their equipment, everybody is weeping because the idea of mother is so intense and strong for all of them. And then they stop and they get back into business. But it's a theme that runs through the book. It's one of the themes that runs through the book. So we see it going throughout.
So being an Indo-Jewish work, how do you place the character of Mina in this context of being a mother, the religious
Well,
context?
Mina is a mother who is in many ways a faulty mother. She brings Gita into the house. Gita, she falls in love with Gita. Gita is a magical woman she has observed for a long time sitting in a cafe, and she's attracted to her, and in this terrorist attack, she has an opportunity to save her, and Gita is very interested in her daughter Maya, who is basically what Nabokov would call an infant at that point, 8 years old, lovely. Gita collects little girls. Mina's desire for love for another woman is so strong that she brings basically a dangerous woman into the house. Later on, Gita rejects Maya when Maya is no longer an infant, and Maya is at a certain point working in one of the slums as a volunteer in Mumbai, and she reports to her mother that Gita has come to choose about 50 little girls from the slum to take to a special institution to train them. So she's an untrustworthy character. It's really alluded to, but a good reader would pick it up, and this person, this dangerous person, probably a child abuser, is brought into the house by Mina. So Mina is also a problematic mother. There is the idea of mother which is so important to Mina. She herself is a mother who is a flawed mother, I would say. So, yeah.
So the title Mother India. Mother India.
The title Mother India is you know, in a way, a problematic title. There's a very famous book called Mother India that I'm sure some of you know about. that was very, very controversial, and it has nothing to do with that book. It's the book by Catherine Mayo, which was very anti-India. I would say anti-India. It spoke about it spoke about issues related to women and various troubles that that Indians had under British rule, and basically made the case that to the degree that they were able to improve on the situation was because of the Brits. And it was a very controversial book, to the point where Gandhi himself came out against it, even though he's treated quite well in that book. I actually read it. But the title came late in the book. While I was working on it, I called it M3, because the three sections are called Ma, Maya, Mina. I just basically called it M3. And in the end, when somebody would say, what's the name of the book, I would say M3. They would say, what's M3? I would have to explain. I have always thought, and I think it's true, that if you have to explain a title too much, it's not such a good thing. A title, in some ways, should tell the reader something about what to expect. This book is about mothers. It's about a lot of other things. I'm trying to stress that. And it's also about India. It's about India, but it's not about the India that you know, which you know much better than I. I've been to India many times, but you know India better than I. But I feel, as a Jew, a very strong connection to India. I think there is a very intense connection, not only in the sense that both Indians and Jews have very, very fierce and ferocious mothers, and there is a huge connection, and not only between Indians and Jews, but between India and Israel. India and Israel are both countries that have been under British rule. The Brits left both countries 1947-48 and partitioned both countries. Both countries were partitioned to basically disastrous effect, and which both countries suffer from to this day. So I would say that there's just, and another parallel that's extremely strong in the book, another theme, going back to the idea of theme, is the idea of seekers. People coming to India seeking something or other, seeking peace, seeking some kind of enlightenment, seeking something. The same is true for Israel. People come to Israel seeking the Messiah, seeking some sort of religious revelation. There just is a huge amount of parallel, and many Jews, and I among them, feel a very strong connectedness to India. So, yeah.
So before moving further, I would like to, it's a very pleasant news that she has been the finalist for National Jewish Work Award. And yeah. So there is a nurturing figure of mother in this novel, and this character of a ferocious mother, the portrayal of Kali in this novel. It's a very, you start from Varanasi and we end at Kolkata. Right. So we start from Ma and we end at Kali, the character.
Right. In the Calcutta section, which I haven't talked about at all, is basically focused on Mina's twin brother, who ends up in his journey and is trying to escape from being extradited back to Israel. He ends up in Calcutta in Mother Teresa's first hospice, where she treated the dying destitute. She called them the dying destitute, turns it into a kind of ashram. And one of the themes that he deals with at that point, he's escaping India because of sexual misadventures. And one of the themes he deals with is the idea that in Judaism there really is no spiritual outlets, no clear spiritual outlet for women. in Christianity, in Buddhism, in many religions, a woman could become a nun. Judaism doesn't have that at all. And there are outlets in India, some of them problematic. One of them is the Devadasis, and he makes it a kind of project, you could say, to collect Devadasis, bring them in, also with very catastrophic effect, because as if you know anything about Devadasis, at a certain point they're just thrown out there into the market. Many of them are ill, many of them carry illness, many of them die young, many of them bring illness to whichever place they come to. They are the ashram that he is situated in, where he has settled, is right next to the Kali temple in Calicut. And Kali is another kind of mother, a ferocious mother, a mother who kills her children, who eats her children, who eats them, spits them out. Another kind of mother that basically exists on this earth. And yet, when many people think about Kali and the kind of immolation and the kind of torment that she puts a child through, they think of it as an act of a mother, that a mother does this out of a kind of maternal wisdom. So that is connected, because the Kali temple is right next to this ashram, and at a certain point, the Devadasis go into the Kali temple, and they, I don't want to tell you the whole story. I'd like you to read the book. The book was printed in the U.S., but it has been bought by Pan Macmillan India. It's coming out in 2 weeks, and I mean, you could even pre-order it on Amazon. It's going to be published in English by an Indian publisher. Maybe I shouldn't tell you the whole story. And you can, if you're interested, you could read it yourself. You could take it out of the library. Don't have to buy it.
So on this note, I'm throwing this session open to the audience. You can have your queries, questions. Yeah.
Any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions. I've been here for a few days, went to a lot of sessions, even just a previous session talking about other religions. One religion that's never mentioned is Judaism. It really doesn't play a role in India, and yet, I mean, you did have a small Jewish community here in Kerala, most of whom no longer are here. Most of them are in Israel. And you do have Jews who come through India, who come as seekers and things like that. But I think it's of interest to sort of think about Jews in the framework of India, to sort of open yourself up to that idea. Anyway, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Hello,
yeah?
Have you, since you've been
You'll have to speak a little louder. There's ambient noises around here on all sides.
Okay. Since you're talking a lot about India, and have you traveled extensively in India? Have you,
Yes.
how do you know so much about India?
Yeah, I myself am very drawn to India, and I have been here a number of times and spend considerable periods of time in these cities just living.
Okay.
I never studied in India, but I just lived in India for periods of time, specifically in the cities that I use in my book, and also in Kolkata, in Mumbai, Varanasi, a very long time. I'm interested. I don't think there's any city on this earth like Varanasi, and I'm also a person who has lived for a long time in Jerusalem. I feel that there's a very great connection between Jerusalem and Varanasi. These are two cities that people come to for spiritual reasons. They come because they want something. Many people come to Jerusalem to to die, period. They come to die, not to be burned and, you know, whatever ashes there are tossed in a ghat, but the idea of dying and being buried in Jerusalem is the ultimate for many Jews. There's a huge, and it's also an ancient city. Varanasi is older. Varanasi is supposed to be 9,000 years old. But Jerusalem is also an old city, and as you probably well know, Jerusalem is a city that is desired and coveted by a lot of people. It has a huge spiritual energy and magnetism and pull, and Varanasi has it too. The other thing about Varanasi that is extremely attractive and dynamic as an American that I experienced always was the way death is right out there in the streets. In the US, I don't know how many people here are American or have lived in America, but death is a very secretive and secreted thing. People die in hospitals, the curtain is drawn, you get a call, your loved one's dead. When you come back, the bed is empty, they're in some sort of refrigerator, and that's it. I think there's something human and part of life when not so much the cremation, but the cremations occur on ghats where kids are playing, where there are animals roaming around, where people are walking, tourists are there. It's the bodies are carried through the streets with the chanting, and it's just part of life, and it is part of life. Something about that draws me.
What was your reason for choosing these three cities?
Well, I didn't choose them with an idea of a book. I never do things like that. I was always interested in Varanasi. I started with Varanasi. I had not been to, on some previous trip, I actually didn't go to Mumbai. I spent a lot of time in Delhi. I was very interested in Mumbai, and then the terrorist attack occurred, and that became a very, very powerful kind of Jewish theme that I could work with. You know, the Mother Teresa hospice was right next door to the Kali temple, was a very great, a very strong juxtaposition that spoke to me in Calcutta. And I had been in Calcutta a few times. I really liked that city. I just liked the way it's decaying. And everything also is in the street, unfortunately. You know, everybody's sleeping in the street, doing everything in the street. But yeah, so I have been in India. I have spent time.